The first part with the hiring process is always not just deciding what task they're going to do, but where are those tasks in the creation process? Do we need someone to execute tasks? Do we need someone to build and design? Do we need someone to manage their tasks or others? Or do we need someone that's a leader role that says, not only are we going to execute, but we're going to decide when and how and what are the priorities? So that's the fundamental question that usually is missing, which is not just like what will they do, but where are we in the creation of that process step? And that's the critical thing that tends to be missing when we decide the role. We don't pick the right level. We just say, here's the things that it'll do.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today, we're going to talk about hiring, specifically hiring the right way. When you think about your business growing and scaling, do you envision it doing it without people? It is possible. I've heard of these unique stories. They're outliers. Typically, the way we scale, the way we grow and really leverage the work of others is by hiring people. That comes with challenges. People are emotional. Some people are really good at the interview process, and then you get them in the door and they're not able to actually add value to the organization. Obviously, that's a pain, but we want to talk today about hiring the right way. Our special guest today is Jessica Lackey. She is a consultant. She's got a lot of corporate experience, but she brings that to the markets of smaller companies. And so if you're a smaller company, you might want to pay attention to this. But if you're a bigger company, I think there's some real insight around hiring. Jessica and I talk about the different aspects of it. I like to break things down, the actual hiring process, selecting the right people. We go in deep into that, some of the mistakes that are commonly made. We look at onboarding. Onboarding is a huge opportunity that a lot of people don't even think is an opportunity to set expectations and make things really well and smooth when you're bringing in those people. And then how do you lead people after the fact? All of that inside today's episode with Jessica. My name is Gene Hammett. I'm an executive coach. We do leadership development, turning managers into leaders. But we also do cultural transformation for companies that are in growth mode. Most of our clients are in the Inc. 5000 or similar. They're growing faster than their peers. That causes chaos. That causes different people challenges. And we help you create leadership that's a competitive advantage. If you are curious about what that means, make sure you reach out to us. First of all, you can stop by my website, coreelevation.com. That's our company. And you can check out some of the ways we work and some of the ways we serve. If you're curious, I'd love for you to reach out to me. If you're really curious, you can go to coreelevation.com/virtual conversation, and you can join us, be a fly on the wall, or just truly connect with people that have been guests on the show or CEOs of fast growth companies. You can ask them questions. Sometimes we bring in experts. This next one that you're signing up for is our book launch episode, which is how to have tough conversations. So we're going to be talking about that. Going to give some giveaways for everyone on there, and really excited about doing that. So go to coreelevation.com/virtual conversations and sign up today. We do a new topic every month. So just check it out and see if it works for you. Now, here's the interview with Jessica. Jessica, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. We're going to have a great episode about hiring the right people and really what that looks like in today's world. Before we dive into that, give us a little bit about your background.
So I climbed the corporate ladder, 15 years in corporate, spanning from consulting at McKinsey & Company, Harvard Business School, 7 years leading teams at Nike before I decided to strike out on my own as a small business consultant, which I've been doing since the pandemic.
So we got a similar background, but I didn't go to McKinsey, didn't go to Harvard Business School or Nike. But I did spend a lot of time in strategy consulting. My first company was built around people who left Bain, and they were based out of London. So I did a lot of that strategy work, and I was like, you want me to weigh in on all this? When you look at that background, are you able to pull some of the magic that was happening there into the work that you do today with your clients?
Completely. One of the best parts of having that corporate background is seeing really well done onboarding, training, and role clarity, because you had to, with that large of an organization, in order to really train people and have them operate in the McKinsey way or in the Nike way, which is actually really important.
I would imagine it's a very different game there than most businesses.
It is and it isn't. One of the nice things about McKinsey as a consulting perspective is that you're always on different projects. And so they have to have really clear standards for expectation setting and how we operate. And so they've done a really great job of making the implicit explicit with their expectation settings about what does it mean to be on a project, to do things. They've really built out that professional development part of their team training.
And we came here today to talk about hiring. I think a lot of people can relate to some of the things that we talked about before we hit the record button, which we bring in someone that we hope that will allow us to focus on higher value work, but then it doesn't work out that way. Or we bring on a manager, but we really need a leader. And you've got some different concepts around this. So let's talk about the problem before we go into the solutions. What are the problems you're seeing with your clients?
Yeah, I work with some smaller organizations who have a list of tasks they need someone to do or help with. And so they hire for, I just need someone to do these tasks. However, where my clients go wrong is we don't stop to consider, well, do we have processes set up to do these tasks? Do we have clear expectations set up to do these tasks? Or are we just handing someone a list and saying, here, have fun, go try this? And we hired someone too junior to actually take this and run with the initiative that we want because we have the initiative. Of course, we think someone's going to, kind of operate with the same level of context and attention that we have. And that's not really the case.
One of the things that you have talked about with me again before we hit the record was hiring for skill fit. It makes so much sense, especially if you've got limited dollars and you can't, you don't have 40 people. You want to hire people that have certain kind of skills, but that's not where it stops. What's your perspective on hiring for skill fit?
I think skills can be trained somewhat. Like I see a lot of people hiring for administrative type roles and they're looking for doers to take on these things that they think are not super high level tasks. But what they're missing is that a lot of times they hire someone for these tasks with the expectation that they're just going to come in and figure out. They're going to have that level of autonomy. They're going to have that level of curiosity. They're going to have that level of inner drive that has them go above and beyond to close the gaps where things aren't clear. But a lot of times those that are skilled in kind of like the administrative tasks don't have that level of curiosity, drive, and autonomy, which, that hungry, humble, smart concept. And so when there's questions, they don't close the gap and we don't come down and close the gap on our side.
I want to give you a chance to talk about the actual hiring process because I would imagine you've learned some things that you could share with us. Maybe it's the key questions, or maybe it's something in the process that you feel like most people aren't even aware that it should be in their process.
The first part with the hiring process is always not just deciding what task they're going to do, but where are those tasks in the creation process? Do we need someone to execute tasks? Do we need someone to build and design? Do we need someone to manage their tasks or others? Or do we need someone that's a leader role that says, not only are we going to execute, but we're going to decide when and how and what are the priorities? So that's the fundamental question that usually is missing, which is not just like, what will they do, but where are we in the creation of that process step? And that's the critical thing that tends to be missing when we decide the role. We don't pick the right level. We just say, here's the things that it'll do.
I've talked to my audience before. They love this. You may not want to share it, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you have a favorite interview question that kind of gets to the heart of something you feel like is important?
I always ask people, I ask two. I ask them for what's the constructive feedback they've received in the last year and what did they do with it? And then I always ask people what they're curious about outside of work. What are something they're passionate about? Depending on the level of team member you're hiring, they should have some kind of passion project or curiosity. Should's the wrong word, but they often find that if they're curious outside of work, they're going to be curious inside of work. And that's what I'm looking for, particularly at those more senior level roles.
I asked Jessica her favorite interview question, so I'm going to give you my favorite interview question. I've shared it on the show before, but I'm assuming you haven't listened to all 1,080 episodes or whatever it is at this point. But my favorite interview question has two parts. The first one is tell me about a project that you set for yourself or a goal that you set for yourself that you didn't complete or you didn't obtain that goal. And ideally, this is a professional project. Part two question is the real heavy lifting. Why didn't you get there? Simple question. What you're trying to tune into is, are they accepting ownership of the reason why they didn't get it? Or are they blaming someone else? Immediately, if they're blaming someone else, you know that when they get challenged, when something doesn't go their way, they're going to be looking for someone to blame. If they took ownership in this question, they're much more likely to take ownership, and that gives them agency to actually address the issue, maybe find another workaround and keep pushing forward. That's what you want inside your company. So I share with you my favorite interview question. Hope you like it. And I'd love to know yours. If you want to email me yours, go to gene@genehammett.com. Email it to me right away. Back to Jessica. Jessica, once they come on, I think a lot of these smaller organizations think onboarding is handing someone maybe a cell phone or an email address, maybe a laptop. But I think you and I both know onboarding is actually a choreographed dance that when you do it well, it sets up everything for that employee. What are some of the key elements of onboarding?
So always having a good 30, 60, 90-day plan. I'm sure you've covered this on your podcast before, but what are they going to be doing in the first 30 days? Kind of titrating their tasks. And so understanding what tasks they'll be doing in the training. But what's missing for so many of entrepreneurs, in at least that I work with, is this concept of standard work. We cover a lot of the what they'll do. We almost never cover the when. What tasks are done every day? What tasks are done specific times in a week? What tasks are done every month? When I worked in corporate, when I worked at a manufacturing company, we had this concept of lean standard work, which was literally a daily checklist, a weekly checklist, a monthly checklist of when things happened. That way, it wasn't just a do this thing. It was explicit, like there was a checklist people could follow. That was actually great from a training perspective, because then you knew when you needed to train someone on specific tasks.
We've been talking about onboarding, specifically values. One element I'd love to add here, Jessica was absolutely right. Give them context around how the values are being used. But I think that you should bring in people, one person at a time. Maybe it's 5 people at a time. Maybe it's more, but bring them all in and do at least 2 hours talking about each one of your values, giving samples or examples, give them stories, have other people in the office come in and talk about that demonstrate these things and ask them questions, deepen their understanding of the values. They're not there to just teach them the values. I want them to feel it, experience it. I want them to know that you live the values. How do you do that? A lot of companies will do this in a half-day experience. They would talk about the behaviors. They would share stories and share why people get awards. And so what you're doing is really talking to them about, what does it take to be a great employee here? Well, first of all, you've got to align with the values consistently. You've got to really be someone who cares about these values, and it becomes a natural part of your living, whatever it is, because otherwise other people are going to be frustrated and they're not going to be the person they want to if they're not living the values. That's my take. Hopefully you get some value out of this. Back to Jessica. Now, I stress also values, not just in the hiring process, but in the onboarding process, because I think it's a really good place to bring in someone and let them know the expectations. So we've done a lot of work, I hope, with the company values, but in onboarding, they miss values. Do you have any specifics that you can add around, incorporating your values into the onboarding process?
I think it's about bringing those values to life with examples, because a lot of times we can have values that are relatively generic, and I want people to get really dialed in to say, this is how this value looks like in practice. This is how it doesn't look like in practice. So if we're able to really translate that to, this is how this value appears in these tasks that are on your to-do list, I think that really helps contextualize and helps the new employee integrate what those values mean to you in your language.
So we've talked about the hiring process and we talked about the onboarding process. Now let's talk about like day-to-day, I'm going to call it leadership, not management. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs will complain about an employee, but they won't realize that they've really contributed to this. They've really been critical, if not an obstacle, inside of that person actually performing and doing what you expect them to. But it's so easy to blame them, so easy to say they don't get it. What are you seeing when it comes to your clients and in your world of how leaders are contributing to not having the kind of employee experience that they want?
The number one mistake I see hands down is the delegation process, where delegation looks like throwing a task on a task manager with no context, or it looks like tossing a task over the fence, or just sending something an email and being like, do this. We're not setting context. We're not setting expectations. We're not telling them kind of what we expect the output to be. We're not giving them what level of authority they have to do this task. We're also not telling them when we'll check in. I mean, one of the things that they taught us in consulting was that you set the context up front, but you also say, to what level are we going to check in at? That way you check in when the task is 5% done to confirm understanding, instead of waiting for 2 weeks to say, oh, I waited this to be done. And then it comes back and it looks completely different than you expected. How can we communicate that timeline up front to kind of head off at the pass?
Jessica was talking about delegation. I want to give you another tool. I know I'm offering a lot for you today, but one of the things that we found is people don't have a simple framework for some of these things. And if you want one of our simple frameworks that help you be a better leader, help you communicate better, just send me an email, gene@genehammett.com, and ask for a delegation planner. There really is a way to delegate the right way. There's 7 elements. You can ask for the 7 elements of success and delegation. That will help you, but I want to give it to you for free. No opt-ins required. Just send me an email, gene@genehammett.com. Get the delegation secrets, if you will. Back to Jessica. I've seen this too in our work, and we have a process that I will share with the people here of the show about delegation. But what I hear back is, well, if I do a 5% check-in to make sure that they're heading in the right direction, isn't that micromanagement? I'm like, no, it's just a place for both of you to make sure you're in alignment together, because the easiest time to fix it is early, not in the middle, and certainly not at the end. What would you add to that?
Micromanagement is when you haven't, in my definition, is when you didn't explain and make the kind of the underlying implicit expectations explicit. And so you're holding them to a standard that they don't know about, they can't hit because you haven't communicated it. If, when you communicate those expectations, when you check in on a regular basis, this isn't like checking behind them, but it's setting the conditions for them to be successful. I think the biggest, challenge is when you expect them to, and kind of manage them as if they can read your mind. I mean, you know this, but they can't, no matter how senior they are. And so, being overly critical and like hounding them to get things done when on the back end is micromanagement, and the beginning is being clear and kind.
Love the frame that you've put into that, Jessica. We've been talking about hiring the right employees, but really this is about how do we onboard them? How do we truly create the kind of experience that this is a good working relationship? I want to go into one of the parts of your work is a lot of people are hiring the wrong people. They may bring in a junior level employee because that's all they can afford, but yet they don't have any experience. And you kind of got an approach around this is maybe finding that senior level person that is more part-time than full-time to be able to bring more strategy and more insight to the process. Tell us a little bit more about why that's important.
Kind of going back to that where are you in the implementation of a process or implementation of a task? If you bring on someone to just execute without building the process first, either you're going to have to do it or you're going to have them do it, and it's probably not going to go so well. But now, especially post-pandemic with remote and virtual work, you can bring on fractional talent that is able to operate. They can implement projects. They can be, your second, a second pair of hands to help implement things so that your junior level team members can just do at their level. It's really hard to ask someone who hasn't been hired with that skill set to build and design and implement to do that, to do it well. We can save a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money by actually spending slightly more to someone who can do it quickly in an hour versus someone that's going to cost your time and their time for, 10, 20 times longer.
Jessica, we wrapping up today's conversation around hiring the right way. And you've probably been through different aspects with clients and different types of leadership. What is the biggest leadership mistake that is happening beyond delegation that you could share with us today?
Especially in small businesses, people I've discovered don't want to give feedback because they wonder, are my standards too high? And am I being too critical? And I say that on the one hand is like, well, you might be, because again, we're not giving that communication. We're not taking the time up front to be explicit with our expectations. And so sometimes on the back end, it isn't fair, but I really want people to lean into being clear, telling people what they want, what they expect. And if that's not happening, if they're not, we do want to look at ourselves and say, what are we doing to contribute to them not performing? But I see too many people avoiding hard conversations, avoiding that radical candor because they're so terrified if people were to leave. But I think that's doing a real disservice because they are just in their minds all the time about, am I managing? Do I have too high of standards? And I want people to be more open and honest with like fund performance management with their team members.
Now, probably don't even know what my next book is, do you?
I don't.
It's a surprise to you, but you set me up really well. We're just putting it out there. We're going to have, probably when this comes out, it'll be a few more weeks, maybe a month more. But the title of the book is How to Have Tough Conversations. It is such an important need. You said it. People are avoiding this. Your managers are avoiding it. Executives avoid these things. They want to be liked. They're not sure what to say. Maybe it's micromanagement. Maybe it's not. It's all these like unclear thoughts are going through their head. And there's also not a clear framework. Even some of the best books on there, Radical Candor, isn't a framework to actually do it well. It's a great idea and we should be doing it, but we're building the book and literally it's titled How to Have Tough Conversations. I know it's right on the nose, but thanks for setting that up. You didn't even know, but thanks for being a part of our book launch.
Well, now I can't wait to read it and give it to all my clients who need a framework for that conversation, because I think that's for small business owners, you can't afford to have someone who's not contributing to part of the team. There's not enough, in bigger organizations, there's a lot of slack, but in smaller organizations, every team member has to be operating with the effectiveness that you need. And so that's why, this is such an important book.
Well, Jessica, I really appreciate you being here, sharing your wisdom. We've been talking about, how to hire right, and love your shares today.
Thank you.
Wow, what a great interview. I love the detail that she brought and the clarity that which she talked about, the hiring process, the onboarding process, the leading process, hiring people the right way. When you hire the right way, you really will have a different kind of employee that's coming on board, and actually one that provides value to the organization and isn't difficult to lead through the process as you grow. Now, if you hire the wrong way, it's going to cost you, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and you're going to be frustrated. That goes without saying, but I'm just making sure that you understand how important this topic is. My name is Gene. I love to help you and help you grow your business, help create predictable growth and expanding growth. Even if you go on vacation, your company should be expanding without you. Now, I say that, and a lot of people know that they're not there yet, but we build the foundation to make that happen, and we really want to help you do it. If we can help you in any way, make sure you reach out to me at gene@genehammett.com. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.